At long last, our journey through this nightmare has taken us to the open plains and the low-lying pools, broken up by half-melted hills and a flora more brain-like than either of us would care to acknowledge. The nightmare is opening up, and we start like all good builds with a solid structure. The hope is that this will serve as the first of a couple of boards that will connect to each other, each with a different theme or part of a nightmare. So make sure you hit the subscribe and turn on your notifications for when those come out. You're not going to want to miss these. So I decided this one, the first one we're going to start with is going to be the Uplands board. So we started with just a large sheet of foam, and then adding some scraps that I found to bulk up a hill. This thing got a moderately well mixed coating of sculpt mold, but you had to be very careful not to wholly mix it and not to play with it too much. I wanted to recreate a melty effect, if you will, and not going back to smooth it out creates this almost runny stone-like texture that I think emulates those you'll find in Bloodborne itself. We'll come back to the melty nature, but keep that in mind as we walk through this entire process. The stonework is just a collection of plaster of Paris bits that have been poured over a crumpled up aluminum foil sheet and let set to dry, and then just crack to shape, and it forms a kind of flagstone that very much emulates the game kind of stonework that you can find. So the flagstone is just going to be adhered with some glue and then given and shaped in such a way that it creates some interesting space for you, the viewer, to look at while still remaining playable. This really marks the underlying concession that you have to consider when you're building a playable board versus just a display board. I can't simply fill every little gap with the materials that are on it like you can in a video game where grass and stuff will simply move and reform behind the character. The entire board is textured then with just a mixture of glue and coffee grounds just to add some interesting bits and to kind of tie everything together. We then move on to probably the most important new element to this entire nightmare series of videos: the brain fungus plants. These are surprisingly easy to create. Once you've tried it a couple of times and experimented a little bit, you can knock these things out pretty quickly. All you're going to do is draw just a bead of hot glue directly into a shallow pool of water. This is going to be the base for our brain fungus flower. Then you just keep adding other layers of glue on top of your base piece, and then just using the hot end of your glue gun to bend and push the layers into the shapes that you want. And you want to create an irregular pattern. You don't want to use it to create a solid, completely clear piece of glue. You want to create those wrinkle-like patterns that come from the adhering of several layers of glue to each other. That will get you this weird brain fungus shape. We're going to make a number of these at various sizes, and they're going to double as platforms for minis to stand on. And they look pretty good when placed into small groups. One or two of these, based off the size, is simply perfect. Just use a bead of glue to adhere them to the actual base itself, and then just use the hot end to clean up some of the more unsightly strings. The trick to getting these right is to make the adhesion layer actually look like it's growing out from the ground itself, not just being used as an adhesion layer. You need that organic integration that makes it feel like it's spread out and then up, like it's a cancerous tumor on reality, or like stone turned fleshy. So try a few different shapes out, and you can create some interesting shapes like hooks, and like hot glue is really your best friend when it comes to creating these like nightmarish fungoid creations. Returning back to the paint tray for a moment, if you start to drop glue into the water and make sure that it connects to each other, you can create interesting egg-looking patterns akin to like a frog sack. This opened up some interesting ideas for me, which I then decided, well, why not have them hanging off the vertical walls instead of just using this brain fungus as the decoration? So I decided, let's consider the overall composition. We're going to put these on the left side of the piece on that hill uplands area, while the brain fungus ones would go near the swampy water and that side of things, just to balance the entire piece out visually. Painting. Lighter gray, and then follow that up with a quick white on just the stonework and some portions of the melty looking sculptural areas. The open spaces between the stones and the melty areas are then going to get hit with a brown, and that's what we're going to use to blend this like real world earth texture and into the melty areas and into the blue-black stone of our road, if you will. This kind of all comes together to give the impression that the entire thing is the same material, just some of it is melted like a half-remembered dream. The fungus... cut that. To finish off the stone and the melty areas, we're just going to hit it with a mixture of blue and green wash, like the rest of our Nightmare Frontier set, and just leave that to dry for a while. The fungus and the egg sacs, these are going to both be given a quick coat of a flesh color, which will serve as a base. The fungus then just gets a straight wash of red on top, making sure to get into all the little crevasses and spaces between the glue. And then it's also given a quick highlight afterwards of a lighter flesh tone created with our base and just a little bit of white. This will really help to sell the idea of brain fungus. I could have also been helped out by adding a little bit of purple into it. That might have been a better idea, but I want something to contrast with the green of the stone wash a little bit better. And make sure you add a little bit of that red wash just around the base of each of these fungoid plants. And just kind of spread it out on whatever stone or melty structure they have, just enough to make it look kind of organic. The egg sacs, we gotta go for the creep. Each of these sacs is going to get given a bright yellow spot. Using the bright yellow here means even if it's dulled down, we won't lose the color. And these are just going to go randomly onto every drop of these sacs. We still want it to stick out, remember, after we wash it and we give it a quick dry brush. We're trying to recreate an egg-like pattern. So with just a drop of gray, we're going to create little eyes or slits or embryos inside at random points on each of the yellow spots of these little eggs. Try to make each one unique, and then you have something that maybe it's like the disturbed thoughts of whatever dreamer dreamt this nightmare. Over all of the egg sacs, they're then just going to get a quick red wash to match the fungoid plants, and then the same light dry brush of that lighter fleshy color. This will help to sell the idea of encapsulating the entire thing as an egg sac of the same material. Granted, this could also be achieved using some different finishers or other reflective coats, but for my ease of time, and so I didn't have to run out to the store again to go get other things, I just decided to go this direction and call it good. The final step is to add some grass tufts to the piece. Once again, you have to make the concession to playability that you can't add nearly as many as you would find in Bloodborne itself. So, we're just going to cut some rope and then shape that into clumps and glue a few here and there. Just to capture, starting over, you want just enough to capture the idea of the nightmare aesthetic without having to cover the entire thing in as much grass as you can often find in the game. The final step would be then to add some spider webs to the recessed areas of the cliffs and the hill, just to kind of tie this set in with the tower, with the roadside coffins and that stuff, so that it looks continuous. These are just cotton ball scraps that have then been soaked in some watered down glue, and you basically have this piece done. There's just one final task that I loathe. And the overall composition of this piece was meant to invoke a higher elevation location that was running from the left to the right. The first layer of acrylic is tinted with a dark green and then poured over the base to form a kind of sediment layer and deliver that first level of color. Then the second batch of resin, it was mixed and poured over to kind of build up the volume. Unfortunately, it was at that point that I think the seal somewhere on my retaining wall broke underneath and the resin ran between the board and the tape. And I ended up losing most of the acrylic that I had poured in during the drying process. Once again, resin betrays me. And there we have it. The Nightmare Frontier is done. I love this piece, other than the resin. This piece just works on so many levels. The brain fungus is sufficiently floral looking, but it has that human brain texture. And the eggs, while it could definitely be better, I'm incredibly happy with both of these for having never tried this technique before. They both look completely alien and add so much busyness to it that it creates a almost overwhelming sensation when you combine it with the sculptural melty-ish patterns and the broken stone. There's just so much going on that one might feel like it might even hurt the brain. The real magic is working with these various mediums that you can cut foam and sculpt a mold into human shapes and create normal looking buildings, but you can also create this alien reflection, this molten stone slipping hills and organic growths that echo the waking world itself. And all it takes is a few touches of grass, some flagstones, and some spider webs, and your brain starts to say, this is reality, isn't it? I hope you found this inspiring and just a bit mind twisting. Pushing beyond the limits and merging materials like this is fun and creates some really, truly unique, stunning pieces of art. I'm sure my players are going to both love and loathe this piece whenever it gets onto the table. So, if you enjoyed this, consider giving a like and dropping a comment below. Subscribe for more like this and check out the rest of the sister builds to this that led up to it. I upload RPG world building tips and tricks and terrain builds on a mostly weekly basis, so why not subscribe and follow the mad ramblings of the mind that conceives this little nightmare? Have a great one.